Welcome to my new series on IB history. This series of videos is going to focus on the Chinese Civil War. This very first video is going to be the key concepts and terms that you need to know, and a brief introduction and rundown of the Civil War. So the first thing you need to know about studying the Chinese Civil War is about a language quirk that you're going to encounter. So there are two systems of changing Chinese characters to English characters so that English-speaking people can read and pronounce the names that are being used in Chinese characters. The first system that we use is the Wade-Giles system, and this is considered a bit outdated now. And you can see some examples of how these spellings are different. So in the Wade-Giles system, Mao Zedong, and in Pinyin, which is the newer updated system that is used primarily in newer textbooks, is Mao Zedong. Another example that you might come across is the Kuomintang, and that will be bracket GMD, is in Pinyin known as the Kuomintang, and that's KMT in Pinyin. The other important one that you might come across is the different spelling of Chiang Kai-shek. So Chiang Kai-shek is the leader of the Kuomintang or the Kuomintang, and he is either spelt, if it's Wade-Giles, Chiang Kai-shek, and if it's Pinyin, Jiang Ji-shi. The important thing is, you know, that when you see those two different spellings, you know who they're referring to, and they're referring to the same person. And the really important thing to note is that although you'll come across texts using both Wade-Giles and Pinyin, the IB materials, most importantly the exam, will use Pinyin exclusively. So you have to know that when you see Jiang Ji-shi, they're actually referring to Chiang Kai-shek in something that you've read. So you need to know that there are two ways of spelling these important names, and these are the ones that you'll most commonly come across. So just the important facts about the Chinese Civil War. It runs from 1946 to 1949, and it results in the death of 6 million soldiers and civilians combined. It is fought between the Kuomintang and the Chinese Communist Party. The Kuomintang are also known as the Nationalists. The origins of this war stretch really far back into the 1920s, although the conflict is put on hold during the Second World War and the Second Sino-Japanese War, as the two sides actually united to fight against the foreign invaders, the Japanese, which is why it doesn't officially start until 1946, although the origins go much further back than that. So what reignites the conflict after the Second World War? Of course, their united effort was very successful. They managed, in combination with the US, to defeat the Japanese and remove the foreign invaders from their country. But all along, both sides always had one eye on who was going to take back control after that conflict ceased. So Jiang Ji-shi expected that the final US attack on Japan would actually be mounted from within China. So he thought after the war concluded there would be a huge surplus of US soldiers who had been supporting the final defeat of Japan in China, based in China. So he thought that there would be a large US presence after the war to help him squash any communist resistance that remained. However, that wasn't what happened. Of course, Japan was defeated primarily through naval battles that overtook the Pacific Islands, and the final attack against Japan was mounted from those islands, and then of course culminated in the use of the atomic bombs. So there was actually never a huge US presence in China to mount that final attack. So Chiang Kai-shek didn't have that US soldier to support him in the defeat of the Communist Party straight after the Second World War. He also had a little bit of another complication in that the Soviet Union also had an army present in Manchuria until 1946. They didn't leave until 1946, but when they did, they took $2 billion worth of resources and machinery. How friendly was that? They were there with Jiang's permission. He had signed the Sino-Soviet Treaty of Friendship, allowing this to happen. And that seems a bit strange, because you would think that the Soviet Union would be on the side of the Chinese Communist Party, but they weren't. The Soviets didn't like the Chinese Communist Party. They didn't think that that they were united enough to win and take over China, but they also recognized the threat that Mao Zedong posed, I suppose. They didn't want a rival communist international leader that they would have to deal with if the Communist Party were successful. The Kuomintang also had support from the USA, although they didn't have those troops that they expected. The USA did try to help by bringing the CCP and the KMT together for negotiations in 1945, but the talks quickly broke down and fighting resumed by June 1946, so the outbreak of the war. The US recognised this as a lost cause, I guess. In January 1947, all talks broke down, and the USA removed themselves from that mediating role, but they continued to support the KMT with advisors and weapons right towards the end of the war. So how does it end? Well, it ends with Mao declaring the People's Republic of China in Beijing in October 1949, and it ends with Jiang Jiechi and the KMT fleeing to Taiwan and establishing what's known as a separate nationalist state known as the Republic of China, which we know there's still some political difficulties in recognition of the ROC versus Taiwan and things like that. But the Civil War ends in 1949 October, when Mao declares Beijing the capital of a new nation-state known as the People's Republic of China and establishes his communist authoritarian state. So that was a really quick rundown of the language issues that you're going to be presented with when studying the Chinese Civil War, and a really basic outline of who's involved, including the foreign states that are involved. Next video I'll be starting to dig into those origins of the Civil War that stretch right back to 1920s and even earlier. Thanks for listening. Bye!